Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. In our next conversation with Dave Butler, author of Plain and Precious Things, we're going to talk more about oaths. You know, in our last conversation, he talked about how Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, those are a bad thing. Well, prior to 1991, we had a lot of oaths in the LDS temple ceremonies. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? You won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Let me go back to the oaths for just a second.
Okay, this is interesting. We're about to something really good here, so let's not take too long.
Okay. Prior to 1991, the LDS temple ceremonies did have some oaths, and they were taken out.
Yeah.
Most people believe in response to the Godmakers movie.
Something, yeah.
And so, is that a problem?
You're asking a very big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Joseph says when he endows Brigham, we haven't got this quite right yet. We'll have to work on it. Devery Anderson has documented that the temple ordinances have changed.
Right. And they're still changing.
And I don't know.
I mean, this is interesting because
we're on tricky ground here, right?
I know, I want to be careful, but
yeah.
The reason, another reason I want to bring this up, you probably know, because I didn't know you were a listener, which is awesome. But I've had a lot of fundamentalists, and
Sure.
They think a lot of these modern changes are a problem, and they want to go back to the earlier ceremonies, like especially the 1877 ceremonies, where those oaths were there.
Sure.
And so, you know, a lot of people would look at those oaths as relics of Masonry. And I will say that the newer temple ceremonies do seem to try to jettison some of this Masonic influence. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up, are these oaths that pre-1991, were they a mistake, or, you know, and now we've gotten rid of them and it was, you know, we can thank the Godmakers for that, I guess. I don't know.
Another change that has happened is that women don't veil themselves. And I understand reasons to make that change. Those reasons have to do with trying not to traumatize people, trying not to communicate servility or second-class status to women. I'm all in favor of that. But that makes those changes risk being political, or even more crass than political, basically in the nature of marketing changes, just making things more palatable, adding more sugar to them. And I think we really lose something. And this is going to go almost certainly beyond what you and I are going to cover today, okay? But when one is putting on different clothing in a sacred context, you're changing ontologically who you are. You're adopting a new identity. You're becoming a new being. And this is what Jacob at 2 Nephi 9 refers to as putting on the robes of righteousness. We're going to see in Matthew chapter 6 that God clothes people who are coming through the Sermon on the Mount ordinance, okay, as a way of changing who you are. And the act of putting on a veil is not the act of removing my personal identity or becoming faceless. It is the act of taking on the identity of the great capital P person who lives behind the veil. And I'll try to touch a little bit on this, but I think there are a thousand reasons to understand that as a woman, that behind the veil, when you pass through the straight and narrow gate, Matthew 7, or you pass along the straight and narrow path, 1 Nephi 8, and you see the tree with good fruits in both of those chapters. And in 1 Nephi 8, people fall down. I think this might be verse 20. 1 Nephi 8, when they reach the tree, they fall down, and then they eat the fruit. Now, why do they fall down? Well, it's not because they're tired. It's because in the presence of a divinity, you prostrate yourself, you lie down on your face, right? You don't, the little kind of bow at the waist is this very nice democratic European, that's not how you bow in the presence of a god. You lie on your belly. The Greek word for it is proskunesis. And I think that's what we're seeing in 1 Nephi 8 when people enter into the presence of the tree of life, which is I don't want to the problem is that I am both a temple mystic and I am also a child of the Enlightenment, so I am torn. Let me use some language of the Enlightenment, okay, for a moment. The tree is the great symbol of the mother, okay?
We've talked about that with Dr. Larson.
The tree is behind the veil in the temple. Okay, go look at LDS temples. Go into the Holy of Holies and just sit there and look and say, is the tree of light and life here? Okay, that is marking the presence of the mother. When you put your veil on, I don't believe you were saying, I am inferior, I have no identity. I think you were saying, as I approach the mother, I become her. And we never put that in words because we never put any of this in words. But I think we have done our women, our sisters, our daughters, our mothers, I fear we have done them a terrible disservice because we've taken away from them. We let them think that a symbol of their power was actually a mark of their servitude. And when they then rightly objected, well, I don't feel like I should be in servitude, we just took it away entirely. And I think that's a loss. So I'm going to get in trouble for this, but so be it. And again, I'm just a guy in a ward, okay? I'm just a guy in a ward. I'm the elders quorum secretary. I take roll. If no one signs up to go down to Spanish Fork to work in the meat plant, I have to do it. That's my calling. So I am not confident that the changes we make are necessarily corrections. I think we may be making them for expediency, trying to get people to come into the temple. We may even knowingly compromise. We may even say, hey, we're dropping something that Joseph thought was right and that is valued, but like it's turning people off. We need to water the temple down so we can get more people to take it, right? I fear that might be what we're doing. And maybe that's necessary. Maybe that's the right thing. If so, how great is it that Matthew chapter 5 records that in the ordinance there was a covenant penalty? And Alma 30 says, no, man, it was real. If you went and sinned against this light and knowledge, you got trodden underfoot and died. Right. Your viewers are going to hate me. Or I'll get in trouble. I've been waiting this for years. It's all right. Okay,
so I'm not sure why we went to the veil because I asked about the oaths. Are those related somehow?
I wanted to use that as an example of saying I'm not sure. It was an example of like the general point, right? Like the removal of the oaths is the same thing. Like, are we making it nicer for people? Sure. People perceive that we took something from Masonry, so we want to sort of distance ourselves from that so that more people will go through the temple ordinances, or we'll stop saying Masonry. By the way, the latter isn't the case. No one's going to stop saying they got this from a Freemasons because we took some Masonic symbols out, because they'll just say, oh, they took them out, right? We're not sparing ourselves any disagreement or persecution. Well, maybe our young people will be more willing to do it if they don't see terrifying penalties about, if I don't live up to my covenants today, awful thing will happen.
It's kind of interesting because if you talk to fundamentalists,
yeah,
then they're like, well, because they took the penalties out, that just shows the apostasy of the current LDS church.
Did you ask Denver about this? I'm curious.
I didn't ask him about that. I'll have to. But Denver's kind of a different kind of fundamentalist because he doesn't like polygamy. But
right.
I mean, he's a fundamentalist, but he's not.
Right.
Typically, when we think of that, we think polygamy, and he's not.
He's another thing.
Yeah. But, the reason I brought up that question was because you were saying, say yes or no. I mean, that's what Jesus said, say yes or no.
Yep.
Don't do oaths.
Yep.
And so the question that I had was, well,
we just did an oath.
We did oaths in the temple till 1991. And then is that a mistake?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think having a covenant penalty, but having people accept moral teachings with a yes or no is consistent with what's in the Sermon on the Mount.
Okay. I mean, because it could be argued from the Sermon on the Mount then that
maybe it shouldn't have been an oath.
They shouldn't have been there.
Maybe there should have been a warning of the covenant penalty, but not an oath attached to it. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which would be a strike against the fundamentalists to say, see, you're just using all the masonry, right?
Yes. Although the big strike against all of us, Rick, the big strike against all of us, right? This is like a meta point. This is like, why does Dave care about this? Why is Dave talking about this? Why is he here? Okay. I do not get tenure. I only risk alienating my Gentile science fiction readers if they run into this recording. They're not going to read this, watch this, and be like, Dave is awesome. I'm going to go buy more of his sci-fi novels. Like, no. Why am I talking about this? It's 2024, right? Mm-hmm. 195 years we've had the Book of Mormon. That whole time, we've been told, man, there's a bunch more. You just need to live up to this part, and then there's a bunch more you can have.
It's all in Brazil.
Well, I've read his stuff too. Where is it, Rick? Where is it? It's 195 years, right? Like, we're failing somehow. We're failing. And I'm not saying I, Dave, have the answer to why we're failing. Listen to me. I am saying I think we've been reading the Book of Mormon wrong and treating it as not a serious thing. And this is my effort to push the dialogue to a more serious conversation. And I say this in connection with the whole fundamentalist and the temple thing, because the temple and the Book of Mormon are the same revelation. Book of Mormon is not complete. Joseph endows Brigham and says, we need to get this. This is not perfect yet. We need to get it right over time, right? When are we going to have the finality of the revelation? What are we not doing that means we just keep like gnawing at our own leg on the temple and just changing things to appease people, arguably, maybe? Where's the rest of the Book of Mormon? That's what I worry about.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for answering that. You can go back to, wasn't it Matthew 5:48?
Matthew 5:48.
Okay.
Matthew 5:48. Okay. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven, your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Now this feels very heavy, right? The command to be perfect. But there's two things I think you need to know about this. One, the Greek that is translated as be or be ye can be an imperative. It can be a command, but it's esistha, it's literally a future. It's you will be perfect, which is interesting because I think if we look at the 3rd Nephi 12 version, it says something like that ye may be perfect. Not be perfect, but that ye may be perfect, right? Which is more consistent with reading this as a future.
Well, and frequently, if you're talking about this in gospel doctrine class, people will say, perfect isn't a better word. It should be complete.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. So the word perfect here is teleoi, which means complete in various senses. Teleia can mean your taxes. So if think teleoi can be, you've paid your taxes. We all are complete on April 16th, except those who file for an extension. So, but it's also complete in the sense of having gone through the required ordinances. So a teleos is an initiate, okay? Someone who has been initiated, who is complete in that sense. And that really changes the tenor of this verse, because it ceases to be a commandment to be perfect and instead marks a change of transition. You've gone all the way through this first room of this ordinance. Moses has guided you. He's giving you moral instruction. You're warned, covenant penalty. You're warned about Satan. You've reached the end. And before you transition over to the next room, you are given a title. You're given a new name. You're given a new status, which is you become a teleos, become one of the teleoi. Now, what is that in Hebrew? Because, again, Jesus might be doing this in Aramaic. He's not doing it in Greek, right? Nephi is not doing it in Greek. Nephi is doing it
in Egyptian.
Maybe in Egyptian or Hebrew, right? He's not doing it in Aramaic even. So what might that be in Hebrew? There's a couple of possibilities. The one I find most convincing is shalem. Shalem is, it means complete, but it also means peaceable. And it's complete in the sense of whole, okay? And so shalom today in contemporary Hebrew means peace, but it's also health, okay? And so just casual greeting, shalom Rick, ma shlomcha, is peace Rick. What's your health, right? And shalom that's both shalom. What's ma shlomcha? What's your health, right? How you doing? So a shalom is somebody who is complete, whole, healthy, and I think there are reasons we'll probably get to for thinking that as we look at the rest of the ordinance. But let me show you, and there are just sit, and here's more homework. This is all homework.
Don't assign homework at Gospel Tangents.
That's the problem. You need to be assigning more homework, Rick. We need to be more strict, not
I
less.
get plenty of homework in my math classes. I'm good.
All right. Touche. So go look for appearances of the word peaceable, or even peaceable in connection with mysteries in the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants and in Restored Scripture. One of my favorites is Moroni 7:3. So Moroni 7 is the last we hear of Mormon. Moroni is alone. He's like, hey, I remember that Dad gave this talk. And he puts in Moroni 7, but it's Mormon speaking. And here, I'm going to read this because this is too good to paraphrase. Okay. I'm going to miss it, okay? So Mormon's giving a talk. It is provocatively about the temple subject of faith, hope, and charity. Scripture is Book of Mormon, Moroni 7. And I think he's talking to a mixed audience. Okay? Because he says, wherefore I would speak unto you that are of the church, that are the peaceable followers of Christ. Again, I think if this is Hebrew, he's saying the shalem followers of Christ, suggesting the initiated followers of Christ that have obtained a sufficient, this is really interesting, that have obtained a sufficient hope by which ye can enter into the rest of the Lord. Now, God's rest is another word, another way to talk about the Holy of Holies. Okay? And so there's a discussion of faith, hope, and charity here, but you have to have enough hope. Hope is about having hope to be able to enter into God's rest. It's not a generalized hope. It's a hope of living with God in the resurrection. And it's a spiritual gift you have to have, or that you get on your journey towards the Holy of Holies. Okay? But he says this, have obtained a sufficient hope by which you can enter into the rest of the Lord. From this time henceforth, until ye shall rest with him in heaven. Now this gets back to your earlier point about your question about Denver and like, are we talking about the temple or are we talking about real things? And the answer is yes. Right? That's the answer, because the temple is the map. And this is what Mormon seems to be explicitly saying is, look, you have sufficient hope that you can enter into God's rest now. Now. That doesn't mean you're going to die. You don't die now. But in here and now, you can be where you are, as I am talking to you, in the Holy of Holies. That is a spiritual gift. That is a spiritual state you can achieve until eventually you shall rest with him in heaven, right? You have an ultimate reward also, which is when you die, you can see God. You will rest with God in his kingdom in the next life, right? But it's both those things. It's not one thing or the other. But he's saying, right, he's speaking to a mixed audience. In the midst of speaking to a mixed audience, he says, I would speak to you that are the peaceable followers of Christ. So you're not all the peaceable followers of Christ. Some of you are. And then he goes on and has this discussion about grasping, receiving a gift from God and holding on to Jesus. And again, this is language of ordinances in Moroni 7 in the Book of Mormon, a book which is full of temple images. All right, that's Matthew 5.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dave Butler, author of Plain and Precious Things. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer. You know, it says, give us this day our daily bread. What is our daily bread? Dave has a very interesting interpretation.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled, is being fulfilled right here. Because you hungered and thirst after righteousness, you prayed, give me the bread that you are in. Give me the you bread, the Yahweh bread, the Melchizedek bread. And Melchizedek, Yahweh the Lord, appeared and fed you the feast of his own flesh and blood, and you were filled with righteousness.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.